Right. It's the 22nd of September, and this is the 64th time we are speaking on the Majjhima Nikāya Suttas. We are coming to the end of the Majjhima Nikāya. Tonight happens to be a very auspicious night. It's the full moon night of September. In fact, it's doubly auspicious. Firstly, tonight in the Chinese calendar, the full moon night of the 8th month, today is the festival, mooncake festival, where Chinese all over the world celebrate by eating the mooncake, and at night all the children go around with lanterns, paper lanterns, of different shapes, and with this candle inside it. So that's one reason why it's auspicious. The second reason is this is the last night of the Majjhima Nikāya talks. So for this Vasala, next year hopefully we can do the last of the series. Next year we hope to do the Digha Nikāya and 6 books of the Khuddaka Nikāya. Okay, now we come to Sutta 151. Pindapataparisuddhi Sutta, the purification of alms food. Parisuddhi, you can say, is the utter purification. Just like in the 4th jhana, you have the utter purification of equanimity and sati, recollection or mindfulness. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Then when it was evening, the Venerable Sariputta rose from meditation and went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side. The Blessed One then said to him, Sariputta, your faculties are clear. The color of your skin is pure and bright. What abiding do you often abide in now, Sariputta? Now, Venerable Sir, I often abide in voidness. Good, Sariputta. Now indeed you often abide in the abiding of a great man, for this is the abiding of a great man, namely voidness. Stop here for a moment. We can see in the previous sutta we read, Majjhima Nikāya 122, the paragraph 6, that's on page 972. We go back to 972. Mahasunyata Sutta, the greater discourse on voidness. In paragraph 6, the Buddha says, however, Ananda, there is this abiding discovered by the Tathagata to enter and abide in voidness internally by giving no attention to all signs. So, abiding in voidness means not giving attention to any sign at all. In other words, it's the signless concentration, as mentioned in other suttas, it's the signless concentration where the mind is void of any nimitta, any sign, any object. This, very few monks can abide in this. The concentration has to be very great and probably have to be an arahant. Now in the commentaries, the Majjhima Nikāya commentaries, he explains this abiding in voidness as the arahant's fruition of voidness. Arahant's fruition of voidness. This is just a comment by later monks. There is no basis for this in the suttas. In the suttas, it's quite clear. It's the signless concentration because there's no attention to any sign at all. So Sariputta, if a monk should wish, may I now often abide in voidness, he should consider thus, on the path by which I went to the village for alms, or in the place where I wandered for alms, or on the path by which I returned from the alms round. Was there any desire, lust, hate, delusion or aversion in my mind regarding forms cognizable by the eye? If by so reviewing he knows thus, on the path by which I went to the village for alms, or in the place where I wandered for alms, or on the path by which I returned from the alms round, there was desire, lust, hate, delusion or aversion in my mind regarding forms cognizable by the eye, then he should make an effort to abandon those evil, unwholesome states. If by reviewing he knows thus, on the path by which I went to the village for alms, and in the place where I wandered for alms, and on the path by which I returned from the alms round, there was no desire, lust, hate, delusion or aversion in my mind regarding forms cognizable by the eye. Then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. Again, Sariputta, a monk should consider thus, on the path by which I went to the village for alms, or in the place where I wandered for alms, or on the path by which I returned from the alms round, was there any desire, lust, hate, delusion or aversion in my mind regarding sounds cognizable by the ear, regarding odors cognizable by the nose, regarding flavors cognizable by the tongue, regarding tangibles cognizable by the body, regarding mind objects cognizable by the mind? If by reviewing he knows thus, on the path by which I went to the village for alms, there was desire, lust, hate, delusion or aversion in my mind regarding these sense objects cognizable by the senses, then he should make an effort to abandon those evil, unwholesome states. If by reviewing he knows thus, on the path by which I went to the village for alms, there was no desire, lust, hate, delusion or aversion in my mind regarding sense objects cognizable by the senses, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, if a monk wants to abide in voidness, then firstly he has to notice whether when he goes for alms round or coming back, whether there was any desire or hatred or delusion in regard to the six sense objects. And if there is, then these are considered evil, unwholesome states. In other words, the mind is moved by these sense objects. Then he should train himself so that to abandon those evil, unwholesome states until he knows that there is no such lust or aversion or delusion concerning these sense objects. And this is this sometimes you can notice if a person has just started to wear the robes, then he's easily moved by the sense objects. It's not trained enough. For example, we know that men have the habit of looking at a beautiful girl, or women have the habit of looking at a beautiful boy or man. So if this monk goes on alms round, or any man, if he notices a beautiful girl, the eye tends to follow. So it is a habit, probably from many lifetimes. So it's not easy to change your habits. So it needs mindfulness, and it needs understanding of the Dhamma, and it needs a strong mind to even know that your mind is moved. Again, Sariputta, a monk should consider thus. are the 5 chords of sensual pleasure abandoned in me? If by reviewing he knows thus, the 5 chords of sensual pleasure are not abandoned in me, then he should make an effort to abandon those 5 chords of sensual pleasure. But if by reviewing he knows thus, the 5 chords of sensual pleasure are abandoned in me, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. Stop here for a moment. So this is the second step. The first step is to guard his sense doors, to notice whether he is moved by sense objects. Now the second step is to abandon the 5 chords of pleasure. That means not to indulge in beautiful forms, beautiful sounds, smells, tastes and touch. In other words, giving up worldly pleasure altogether. Unless a person is very serious about the Dhamma, it is a normal worldly person is not likely to give up the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. Because most people think, what is life without enjoyment, without pleasure, without happiness? So worldly people, they indulge in worldly happiness, but the Buddha says that's only because they don't know of a higher happiness. People on the holy path, on the spiritual path, they want to indulge in a higher kind of happiness, a more permanent type of happiness, a type of happiness that does not give you suffering. Worldly happiness, we indulge in it, the end result is suffering. Because once you indulge in worldly happiness, you tend to crave for it, you tend to attach to it, and then when it goes away or it changes, then you can't stand it and you suffer. So this giving up of the 5 chords of sensual pleasure is quite a drastic step for worldly people. Unless you are totally committed to the spiritual path, you are not likely to take this step of abandoning sensual pleasure. Again, Sariputta, a monk should consider thus, are the 5 hindrances abandoned in me? If by reviewing he knows thus, the 5 hindrances are not abandoned in me, then he should make an effort to abandon those 5 hindrances. But if by reviewing he knows thus, the 5 hindrances are abandoned in me, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. Stop here for a moment. The 5 hindrances are abandoned when a person is just about to enter the first jhana. So you can say that the condition for abandoning the 5 hindrances is to attain at least the first jhana. And this a normal person will not attain, as just now we mentioned. Firstly, that person has to be totally committed to the holy path, the spiritual path, and then only he abandons the 5 chords of pleasure. He does not want to indulge in any worldly pleasure. And then he practices meditation, and if the conditions are right, and he attains the first jhana, then only he can abandon the 5 hindrances. So, you see here, abandoning the 5 hindrances and attaining the jhanas is very much a part of the spiritual path, the holy path of the Buddha. Not like what later monks say, that jhana is not important, jhana is not necessary and all that. Here it's quite obvious that it is a necessary condition. Again, Sariputta, a monk should consider thus, are the 5 aggregates of attachment fully understood by me? If by reviewing he knows thus, the 5 aggregates of attachment are fully understood by me, then he should make an effort to If he knows that the 5 aggregates of attachment are not fully understood by me, then he should make an effort to fully understand those 5 aggregates of attachment. But if by reviewing he knows thus, the 5 aggregates of attachment are fully understood by me, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. Stop here for a moment. So you see, this fully understanding the five aggregates is after abandoning the five hindrances. Only after you have abandoned the five hindrances, then the Buddha says, then you can see things as they really are. Yatta Buddha Jnana Darsana. Then when you can see things as they really are, then when you practice vipassana or contemplation of the five aggregates, then you can understand the five aggregates as impermanent, as a source of suffering, and it is not fit to be regarded as this is mine, this I am, this is myself, as the Buddha says. So, if we know that the five aggregates are impermanent, as the other day the sutta says, you can see the rise and fall of the five aggregates, the appearance and the disappearance of the five aggregates. Just about 2 weeks ago, we had one lady here come for retreat, and she started coming here only recently because the son passed away. She had 2 sons. One is about 23 years old. The younger son is only 9 years old, and suddenly passed away, and she could not take it. So she came here for retreat. So imagine somebody you love so much, this young boy, this lady gave birth to her, and suddenly she appeared in her life. After 9 years, she just died and disappeared altogether from her life. No trace. So life is like that. About 25 years ago, when I was a new monk in Thailand, we were staying in this forest monastery. And then these villages, these Thai villages, when somebody passes away, they will bring the corpse to the wat, to the monastery, and burn it there, cremate it there. Because in the village in Thailand, they don't have these electric burners, gas burners and all that. It's an old-fashioned way. So I saw them bring this old lady, just passed away, wrapped up in cloth, but you can see her face. Then they put her on top of this pile of branches that they had collected. And then they brought more of this wood piled on top of her. And then the monks poured, I'm not sure whether they poured petrol or they poured kerosene or what, and then they lighted it. And then there was a big fire, very big fire, and burned the corpse completely. But they had to wait many hours until the next morning before it was cool enough to go and collect the bones. So it's very striking, One moment you see this old lady there, few hours later, completely disappeared, no trace of her. So it strikes you that life is so impermanent. One moment you see somebody, another moment that person passes away, and the 4 elements return to the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and no trace at all. For a few years there is the memory. After some time, even the memory also is gone. So it's good to see this type of cremation. It becomes strikes you how a person suddenly is there, suddenly is disappeared altogether. And you can see the nature of the 5 aggregates. Due to conditions, they arise, and you need sustaining conditions to keep the body alive, the body and the mind. And when the conditions are not sufficient, then this being dies. The 5 aggregates just fall apart. So because of that, the Buddha says the 5 aggregates are suffering, and what is impermanent is suffering, and something that is impermanent, suffering, bound to change. It's not fit to cling to it as I and mine. If you cling to it as I and mine, you're only asking for pain and suffering. Whether you like it or not, you still have to let go. Just like this lady, the son died. If she doesn't stop crying until all the tears are dried also, it will never come back again. Never come back. So we just have to accept. There's no other choice. Life is this way. Life is painful. Again, Sariputta, a monk should consider thus. Are the four Satipatthanas or the four intense states of mindfulness developed in me? If by reviewing he knows thus, the four intense states of mindfulness are not developed in me, then he should make an effort to develop those four intense states of mindfulness. But if by reviewing he knows thus, the four intense states of mindfulness are developed in me, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. Again, Sariputta, a monk should consider thus. Are the four right kinds of striving or the four right efforts developed in me? Are the four bases for psychic power developed in me? Are the five faculties developed in me? Are the five powers developed in me? Are the seven enlightenment factors developed in me? Is the noble eightfold path developed in me? Are samatha and vipassana, stilling of the mind and contemplation developed in me? If by reviewing he knows thus, samatha and vipassana are not developed in me, then he should make an effort to develop them. But if by reviewing he knows thus, samatha and vipassana, or tranquility and contemplation, are developed in me, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. Stop here for a moment. So here, this part is talking about the Noble Eightfold Path. So a monk should consider how much of the Noble Eightfold Path he has developed. And if it's not complete, then he has to make further effort to completely develop the Noble Eightfold Path. And when the Noble Eightfold Path is fully developed, then the four Satipatthanas will have been fully developed, and the four Samappadhana will have been fully developed, and the four Iddhipada, and the five Indriya, and the five Bala, and the seven Bojjhanga, all these would have been fully developed. And then Samatha and Vipassana will occur, as mentioned in the previous sutta, will naturally occur in this person who has developed fully the Noble Eightfold Path. Again, Sariputta, a monk should consider thus. I'll stop here for a moment, going back to this one. So, I'd like you to see again, the Buddha says, all these have to be developed. The four Satipatthana, the four Samappadhana, the four Iddhipada, etc. In other words, the 37 Bodhipakkhya Dhamma. As I mentioned the previous night, that you cannot just practice the four Satipatthana without practicing the others. Okay, I was just saying that you cannot just want to develop the four Satipatthana by itself without the others, the other Bodhipakkhya Dhamma. You have to develop all the four Satipatthana, the four Iddhipada, the four Samappadhana, the five Indriya, five Bala, seven Bojjhanga, and the Noble Eightfold Path. And when that occurs, when that happens, the Noble Path is fully developed, then Samatha and Vipassana, this monk will automatically possess both Samatha and Vipassana. Again, Sariputta, a monk should consider thus, a true knowledge and liberation realized by me. If by reviewing he knows thus, true knowledge and liberation are not realized by me, then he should make an effort to realize true knowledge and liberation. But if by reviewing he knows thus, true knowledge and liberation are realized by me, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. Sariputta, whatever recluses and Brahmins in the past have purified their alms food, have all done so by repeatedly reviewing thus. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will purify their alms food, will all do so by repeatedly reviewing thus. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the present are purifying their alms food, all are all doing so by repeatedly reviewing thus. Therefore, Sariputta, you should train thus. We will purify our alms food by repeatedly reviewing thus. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Sariputta was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So you can see from here that the Buddha says to purify our alms food, that means to make for a monk, to make the livelihood very pure, then he has to practice the Noble Eightfold Path until he has attained liberation. Then he will have completely purified his alms food. In other words, he will deserve every little bit of food that he gets. It's one of the names for the Arahant is in Chinese is Ying Gong. Ying Gong is worthy of offerings. So if the monk has completely finished his work, completely developed the Noble Eightfold Path and become liberated, then he is worthy of all offerings. So you can see here, this Buddha says that when a monk goes for alms round or coming back from alms round, not only on alms round, whenever he can remember, he should review his progress on the holy path. Firstly, he should check, as in paragraph 3, Buddha says he should check himself whether paragraph 3 to 8, whether he is guarding his six sense doors, whether he's moved by external sense objects. He should not be moved by external sense objects. And he should be careful to abandon evil, unwholesome states of mind. Then after that, he has to abandon the 5 causes of sensual pleasure, totally give up enjoyment of forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and touch. And then by giving up the 5 causes of sensual pleasure, then his mind becomes more and more tranquil because he does not look for pleasure. That is the way to attain the jhanas. And when he attains the jhanas, the 5 hindrances are abandoned. And after attaining the jhanas, then when he practices vipassana or contemplation of the 5 aggregates of attachment, then he can fully understand the 5 aggregates of attachment as being impermanent, as being a source of suffering, as being subject to conditions, subject to change, and not fit or not worthwhile to regard as this is mine, this I am, this is myself. In other words, I and mine. So after that, he has to develop the Noble Eightfold Path fully. And when he develops the Noble Eightfold Path fully, then all the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas are developed, consisting of the 4 Satipatthana, the 4 Samappadana, the 4 Iddhipada, the 5 Indriya, the 5 Bala, 7 Bojjhanga, and the Noble Eightfold Path. And when that happens, then he automatically possesses samatha and vipassana, tranquility and contemplation. And then that will lead, if he practices in the right way, that will lead to true knowledge and liberation. So this is the way the Buddha is saying that a monk should train to purify his livelihood, purify his alms food. In other words, to be worthy of the gifts of lay people. Now we come to Sutta 152, the last Sutta of Majjhima Nikāya, Indriyabhavana Sutta. the development of the faculties. Bhavana is development, Indriya is the faculties. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Kajangala in a grove of Mukelu trees. Then the Brahmin student, Uttara, a pupil of the Brahmin Parasarya, went to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side. The Blessed One then asked him, Uttara, does the Brahmin Parasarya teach his disciples the development of the faculties? And he answered, he does, Master Gotama. But Uttara, how does he teach his disciples the development of the faculties? Here, Master Gotama, one does not see forms with the eye, one does not hear sound with the ear. That is how the Brahmin Parasarya teaches his disciples the development of the faculties. And the Buddha said, if that is so, Uttara, then a blind man and a deaf man will have developed faculties according to what the Brahmin Parasarya says. For a blind man does not see forms with the eye, and a deaf man does not hear sound with the ear. When this was said, the Brahmin student, Uttara, Parasarya's pupil, sat silent, dismayed, with shoulders drooping and head down, glum, and without response. Stop here for a moment. You can see here the Buddha's wisdom, how sharp and swift it is. In one of the suttas, the Buddha praised Sariputta as having very sharp and very swift wisdom. Hasapanya and Javana Panya, I think the Pali terms. Sharp wisdom and swift wisdom. So you see, because this Brahmin Parasarya, he says, development of the faculties means not seeing forms, not hearing sounds. The Buddha immediately said, then the blind man and the deaf man will have developed faculties. Then he realized, it's true. Then he could not answer the Buddha. He was totally ashamed, put his head down. Then knowing this, the Blessed One addressed the Venerable Ananda. Ananda, the Brahmin Parasarya teaches his disciples the development of the faculties in one way. But in the Noble One's discipline, the supreme development of the faculties is otherwise. And Venerable Ananda said, now is the time, Blessed One, now is the time, Sublime One, for the Blessed One to teach the supreme development of the faculties in the Noble One's discipline. Having heard it from the Blessed One, the monks will remember it. Then listen, Ananda, and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, he replied. The Blessed One said, now, Ananda, how is there the supreme development of the faculties in the Noble One's discipline? Let's stop here for a moment. The supreme development, I gather, must be the supreme development of the Arahant. Here, Ananda, when a monk sees a form with the eye, there arises in him what is agreeable. There arises what is disagreeable. There arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus, there has arisen in me what is agreeable. There has arisen what is disagreeable. There has arisen what is both agreeable and disagreeable. But that is conditioned, gross, dependently arisen. This is peaceful. This is sublime. That is equanimity. The agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and both agreeable and disagreeable that arose, cease in him, and equanimity is established. Just as a man with good sight, having opened his eyes, might shut them, or having shut his eyes, might open them, so too concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose, cease just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called in the Noble One's discipline the supreme development of the faculties regarding forms cognizable by the eye. Stop here for a moment. So here when a monk sees form agreeable, there arises in him what is agreeable. In other words, if he sees an attractive object, attractive form or a beautiful form, a likable form, then agreeable feelings arise, pleasant feelings arise. And if he sees an ugly, form, then disagreeable or unpleasant feelings arise. And sometimes form might be attractive in certain ways and unattractive in certain ways. Then you have both agreeable and disagreeable feelings arise. You must understand, Arahant is not like a wood or a stone with no feelings. Arahant also has feelings. The only thing is, Arahant's feelings are totally controlled. He is in total control of his feelings. So here the Buddha says, for this Arahant, who has this supreme development of the faculties, when he sees something pleasant or unpleasant or both pleasant and unpleasant, then the corresponding feelings, pleasant and unpleasant or both pleasant and unpleasant arise. But then he understands that this is all conditioned, and so he attains equanimity very fast. Just as a man with good sight, having opened his eyes, might shut them, or having shut his eyes, might open them so fast. So too the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and both agreeable and disagreeable that arose cease just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. So whatever feelings arise, because he does not cling to those feelings, they just cease. This is called the supreme development of the faculties. Again, Ananda, when a monk hears a sound with the ear, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus, and equanimity is established. Just as a strong man might easily snap his fingers, so too concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, disagreeable that arose, and both agreeable and disagreeable that arose, cease just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called in the Noble One's discipline the supreme development of the faculties regarding sounds cognizable by the ear. Again, Ananda, when a monk smells an odor with the nose, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus, and equanimity is established. Just as raindrops on a slightly sloping lotus leaf roll off and do not remain there, so too concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose, cease just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called in the Noble One's discipline the supreme development of the faculties regarding odors cognizable by the nose. Again, Ananda, when a monk tastes a flavor with the tongue, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus, and equanimity is established. Just as a strong man might easily spit out a ball of spittle collected on the tip of his tongue, so too concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose, cease just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called in the Noble One's discipline the supreme development of the faculties regarding flavors cognizable by the tongue. Again, Ananda, when a monk touches a tangible with the body, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus, and equanimity is established. Just as a strong man might extend his flexed arm, or flex his extended arm, so too concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose, cease just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called in the Noble One's discipline the supreme development of the faculties regarding tangibles cognizable by the body. Again, Ananda, when a monk cognizes a mind object with the mind, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus, and equanimity is established. Just as if a man were to let 2 or 3 drops of water fall onto an iron plate heated for a whole day, the falling of the drops might be slow, but they would quickly vaporize and vanish. So too, concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose, cease just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called in the Noble One's discipline the supreme development of the faculties regarding ideas cognizable by the mind. That is how there is a supreme development of the faculties in the Noble One's discipline. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, whenever for an Arahant who has a supreme development of the faculties, whenever any external sense object, namely form, sound, smells, taste, touch and thoughts, impinge on the sense basis, there might arise pleasant feelings, that means agreeable feelings, or unpleasant feelings, disagreeable feelings, or a mixture. But then they quickly cease, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. So there are a few similes given here to make us understand. The first one, just as a man with good sight, having opened his eyes, might shut them, or having shut his eyes, might open them. Then the second one, just as a strong man might easily snap his fingers, so the feelings that arise just calm down and turn to equanimity. The third one, just as raindrops on a slightly sloping lotus leaf roll off and do not remain there. Then another one, just as a strong man might easily spit out a ball of spittle collected on the tip of his tongue. Then another one, just as a strong man might extend his flexed arm or flex his extended arm. Then the last one, just as if a man were to let 2 or 3 drops of water fall onto an iron plate heated for a whole day. The falling of the drops might be slow, but they would quickly vaporize and vanish. So out of these 6 similes, you can consider these 2 as most appropriate. In paragraph 6, just as raindrops on a slightly sloping lotus leaf roll off and do not remain there. So you can see in the same way the feelings that arise in an Arahant just fall off and turn to equanimity. And paragraph 9, just as if a man were to let 2 or 3 drops of water fall onto an iron plate heated for a whole day. That means the iron plate is red hot, and then you put 2 or 3 drops of water, they immediately vaporize and vanish. So in the same way, whatever feelings arise in an Arahant, pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, they just vanish very quickly, just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, as the Buddha says. That is a supreme development of the faculties. It's very different from ordinary person. An ordinary person, when feelings arise, we cling to it, especially pleasant feelings and unpleasant feelings. Unpleasant feelings, you cling to it in the sense that you have aversion for it, and it sticks in your mind. It sticks in your mind, this aversion. Now we come to paragraph 10. And how Ananda is one a disciple in higher training, one who has entered upon the way. Here Ananda, when a monk sees a form with the eye, or hears a sound with the ears, or smells an odor with the nose, or tastes a flavor with the tongue, or touches a tangible with the body, or cognizes a mind object with the mind, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He is ashamed, humiliated and disgusted by the agreeable that arose, by the disagreeable that arose, and by the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose. That is how one is a disciple in higher training, one who has entered upon the way. Here, the Buddha is talking about a Sheka, an Aryan disciple who has not finished his work, who has not become an Arahant, but he is Arya, still in training. So, because he understands the Dhamma, when he sees a form and certain feelings arise, pleasant or unpleasant, or he hears a sound and similarly these pleasant and unpleasant feelings arise, etc., then he realizes that he is not in full control of himself. He is moved by these external sense objects. So he is ashamed of himself and is disgusted by the feelings that move him. For example, because an Arya he is not finished his work, so he is still moved. For example, he might see a beautiful girl, and then his heart goes boom, boom, boom. Then he realizes he has not finished his work, and he is ashamed. He is not. He's not perfect yet. Especially if there's an Arahant around who can read his mind. Like during the Buddha's time, there were many Arahants who could read their minds. So one of these Arya who has not finished his work, then he has this type of thoughts and feelings and all that. He knows some other Arahants can read his mind. Then he'll be even more ashamed. And how Ananda is a noble one with developed faculties. Here Ananda, when a monk sees a form with the eye, or hears a sound with the ear, or smells an odor with the nose, or tastes a flavor with the tongue, or touches a tangible with the body, or cognizes a mind object with the mind, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. If he should wish, may I abide, perceiving the unrepulsive in the repulsive. He abides perceiving the unrepulsive in the repulsive. If he should wish, may I abide, perceiving the repulsive in the unrepulsive. He abides perceiving the repulsive in the unrepulsive. If he should wish, may I abide perceiving the unrepulsive in the repulsive and the unrepulsive. He abides receiving the unrepulsive in that. If he should wish, may I abide perceiving the repulsive in the repulsive and in the unrepulsive and the repulsive. He abides perceiving the repulsive in that. If he should wish, may I, avoiding both the repulsive and unrepulsive, abide in equanimity, mindful and fully aware. He abides in equanimity towards that, mindful and fully aware. That is how one is a noble one with developed faculties. So Ananda, the supreme development of the faculties in the noble one's discipline has been taught by me. The disciple in higher training who has entered upon the way has been taught by me, and the noble one with developed faculties has been taught by me. What should be done for his disciples out of compassion by a teacher who seeks their welfare and has compassion for them, that I have done for you, Ananda. There are these roots of trees, these empty huts. Meditate, Ananda, do not delay, or else you will regret it later. This is our instruction to you. That is what the Blessed One said. Remember, Ananda was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So here this third one is the Arya with developed faculties. Now this Arya with developed faculties, when these six sense objects impinge on the six sense basis, then if he feels repulsive, he knows then he can, because he's in very good control of his mind. If he wants to perceive the opposite, he can do so. So if he, for example, when we see a corpse, a dead and smelly corpse, we feel revulsion, we are repulsed by it. But for the Arahant, if he wants to, for this Arya with developed faculties, because his mind is so strong, if he wants to perceive the opposite, he can do so. Repulsive becomes unrepulsive, and unrepulsive can become repulsive. For example, if he sees a beautiful form, if he decides that he wants to perceive it as repulsive, then he can consider inside the body there is blood, there is pus, there is excrement, there is urine, all the dirty things, then he can perceive it as repulsive, even though it's a beautiful form. So for this Arya to do that, he must have a very strong mind. He must have the fourth jhana or higher jhana, or maybe even psychic power, where he has very good control of his mind. So he knows when certain feelings arise, he knows, he's aware of it. And if he wants to turn it the other way around, he can do so. But it's different with the supreme development. Just now we read the Arhan with supreme development of the mind. Any feelings that arise immediately, very quickly subside and become equanimous, like automatic. Becomes equanimous. So this is quite an interesting sutta concerning this development of the faculties. So the ordinary person, when any feelings arise, is moved, very much moved by feelings. Whereas for the Sekha, the Arya in training, for example, the Sotapanna or Sakadagamin, then he is also moved, but because he is mindful and he knows the Dhamma, then he feels ashamed. He quickly tries to correct his perception. And then for a monk who has attained the 4 jhanas or higher, the mind is very strong. And when he perceives in a certain way, if he wants to, he can perceive the opposite. And lastly, the Arhan with the supreme development of the faculties, any feelings that arise, of course, is automatic. Pleasant and unpleasant feelings arise, but very quickly they become equanimous, cease, because this Arhan's mind is so how do you say, so still, so calm, that he is not moved. He cannot be moved by feelings. It's like a solid rock, big solid rock, and the wind tries to move the rock. The wind cannot move this big solid rock. So we have come to the end of the Majjhima Nikāya Suttas, 64 talks. It's longer than the Samyutta Nikāya that we did last year. But many of the suttas are very interesting. And we find many of the suttas are very practical, very, very good for monks. Very good for monks. So, if there's anything to discuss, we can discuss. A lay person can attain the first jhana if he strives hard and he spends a lot of effort in meditating, and he has to let go a lot of commitments, a lot of things that give you worry, that give you anxiety. So, for example, a businessman is quite impossible for a businessman to practice the spiritual path. One, for example, a teacher or one in government service, it will be easier. He doesn't have to worry so much. Yes, agreeable and disagreeable refers to mixture, pleasant and unpleasant feelings, right? Yeah. No, these two, pleasant and unpleasant, they are separate, but just that there is a combination. Whether a Sotapanna can become an Arahant. Possible, I think, if he strives. But it is mentioned in the suttas that Arahants are only found in the human plane. So if this Sotapanna, when he comes back as a human being and he strives hard, it is possible probably for him to become an Arahant.
When we go for Pindapata, are we working for food, collecting food, avoiding food, or eating food? Because it's a new food. But as long as I feel uncomfortable with the comfortable, I would like to say that I feel it's not like food for me.
Yes, actually, when we go on Pindapata, as far as the monk is concerned, he is giving a chance for lay people to get married. He's giving a chance for lay people to practice generosity. We don't really beg for our food in the worldly sense, because a person begs for his food when he asks for it. Monks are not allowed to ask. We don't open our mouth. We just stand there and give lay people a chance to do merit. So in that sense, we don't beg for our food. But a lot of lay people, they don't understand. They think that monks go and beg for their food. And sometimes when the monks get a lot of food, some lay people are not happy. Why is this monk so greedy? Take so much offerings from the lay people. The thing is, we never ask. If your karma is good, if the monk's karma is good, then he gets a lot of offerings. If the monk's karma is no good, even he wants a lot of offerings also he cannot get. So we just let things go according to karma. But a lot of lay people, they don't understand. Some lay people, they see, this monk gets so much food, there's no need for me to give him alms food. So they stop giving alms food. There are some people like that. We have experience here, They stop giving us alms food because they think we have more than enough. But they don't know that they need to give alms food. They need to practice generosity. Sometimes some monks, they don't need to go on Pindapata. 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 They don't need If the monk's karma is good, even the monk doesn't go on Pindapata for alms round. Lay people will come and bring food, bring offerings. Monks generally can survive without going on alms food. But we take the trouble to go on alms round to educate the people and to carry on our tradition that has been handed down from the Buddha, and also to give lay people a chance to increase their blessings. So the lay people who don't understand, they think we are begging for our food.
Actually, monk is good to go around to the back. But what do you think about a monk having Dharma or food in the floor or in a bowl? I think in the bowl, I think this is a good time to give people how to have
Eating for a monk, eating in a restaurant, eating in a home, we are governed by the monk's precepts. In the monk's precepts, a monk is not allowed to share the same dish from a lay person, or even sharing the same dish with another monk who belongs to a different Dhamma Vinaya, who follows a different Dhamma Vinaya. We are not allowed to share the food with a monk. For example, we practice Theravada. We are now allowed to sit down on the same table and share food with a Mahayana monk, because they follow different Dhamma Vinaya, they follow different sutras, and their practice of the Vinaya also very different. So because of that, the Buddha has laid down in the Vinaya rules that we are not allowed to share the food with monks of different Dhamma Vinaya. So if a lay person invites a monk to a restaurant, generally we try not to go because it doesn't look very nice. But sometimes when we are traveling long distance, then we have no choice. We have to go to a restaurant to eat. In which case, we make sure we don't share the same dish with the lay people. If possible, we sit on a different table. Sometimes it's not convenient, we can sit on the same table, but we make sure all the food is offered to the monk first. Then after that, we stop taking. We don't take anymore. And going to a house for house dana is alright. Even during the Buddha's time, monks went to lay people's houses to receive alms food. But in the same way, we cannot share the dish with the lay person. What page? Yeah, because noble disciple means Arya. Yeah. Okay, we shall end here on this auspicious night.